Alright, I'm going to give a brief introduction into glycolysis. Glycolysis is an anaerobic pathway that is the first step of cellular respiration. It involves a series of reactions that take energy from glucose by splitting it into two 3-carbon molecules called pyruvates. It occurs in the sarcoplasm of the muscle cell, and that is right here. There is a net yield of 2 ATP and 2 molecules of NADH and pyruvate or lactate per glucose molecule. If glycogen is the substrate instead of glucose, there is a net yield of 3 ATP because it only requires 1 ATP during the preparatory phase. There's 2 main phases in glycolysis. The first main phase is energy investment phase. This is where the glucose comes in and it requires ATP. A phosphate group is transferred from ATP to glucose, which makes it glucose 6-phosphate, which is catalyzed by the enzyme hexokinase. This is more reactive than glucose and is converted into fructose 6-phosphate. More ATP is needed and another phosphate group is transferred from ATP to fructose 6-phosphate, turning it into fructose 6-biphosphate. The enzyme phosphofructokinase activates this. Now it splits into two 3-carbon sugars, DHAP, which is converted into G3P and G3P. Now we're entering the energy payoff phase. This is where ATP is made. G3P is oxidized while NAD+ is reduced to NADH and hydrogen. This exergonic reaction releases energy that is used to form 1,3-biphosphoglycerate. This donates a phosphate group to ADP, making ATP. And it turns it into phosphoglycerate. The phosphoglycerate loses a molecule of water and becomes phosphenolpyruvate and is unstable. Because of this, it donates its phosphate group to ADP, making a second ATP, and is converted to pyruvate or lactate. If there is not enough oxygen for the pyruvate to enter the mitochondria, then it can continue glycolysis and make ATP through lactic acid fermentation. Pyruvate is converted to lactate and NADH turns back into NAD+ to continue glycolysis. This picture shows the difference between rest and exercise. So on the left represents at rest. The consumption of carbohydrates releases insulin and binds to insulin receptors that eventually results in the movement of GLUT4, glucose transporters, to move and allow glucose in the cell. And on the right is during exercise, GLUT4 transporters can move without insulin and glucose can move into the cell. Glycogen degradation increases in response to changes in metabolite concentrations. Glucose from the blood and glycogen are oxidized to produce ATP molecules required for muscle contraction. Glycogenolysis is the process of glycogen breakdown to provide energy and happens during more vigorous exercise. It is initiated by second messengers that activate protein kinases in the muscle cell. For example, if a person is fasting, then glycogen will be broken down to provide energy. Glycogenesis, on the other hand, occurs when there's excess glucose and is stored in the liver and the muscle cells. So I'd like to be an adaptive PE coach, and I would want to incorporate this into a lesson and show how sugar gets broken down by offering some games where we could go through the pathways and enzymes and give an example of how eating a cookie or a piece of candy is broken down.